Hello and welcome to the GCSE Geography Strive for Success presentation. In this presentation, I will talk you through the outline to the GCSE Geography course, how geography is assessed, and what students can do to help themselves to prepare for their upcoming exams in Year 11. The first part of this presentation is looking at what the students have studied in geography and therefore what they will be examined on at the end of Year 11. So the first paper that they will complete at the end of Year 11 is Paper 1, Living with the Physical Environment. This is a physical geography paper where it will assess their understanding on the challenge of natural hazards, which is tectonics, weather hazards and climate change. The living world, where we are focused on ecosystems, hot deserts and tropical rainforests, and physical landscapes in the UK, which includes coasts and rivers. Paper 2 is a separate exam paper, and this is focusing on the human geography that we have studied. So that again, there are three topics: urban issues and challenges, the changing economic world, and the challenge of resource management. With the challenge of resource management, we have focused specifically on energy as a resource. So students will select the energy section when they get to that particular topic on their exam. And for paper 3, geographical applications, this exam is slightly shorter and there have been changes made to this following the recent Ofqual consultation. So students will continue to complete the issue evaluation section, which is where they will be given a pre-release booklet, and it comes from the exam board around March time before the exams, and that's a small information booklet on a topic that relates to the specification. So it could be any of the ones that we've studied, or it could be one of the topics we've decided not to study. And what we will do is we will study that booklet of information in the class. We will talk through what we think could be asked around that particular pre-release booklet, and then students will answer questions on that in their final exam. So they'll be very hopefully familiar with the content, and they will also get given a blank copy of that pre-release information booklet in their exam. So the information will be in front of them. The second part of this exam is going to be based on unfamiliar fieldwork and skills. So this is where students are going to be given fieldwork questions around data collection. It might be about data presentation, it might be about drawing conclusions from sets of data. And what they will do is use their knowledge to apply that to unfamiliar situations. This year, as I've said, Ofqual have had and led a consultation on this. So one section has been removed from this particular exam. So usually students will complete a third section on their own personal fieldwork that they have been out and collected and completed as a group. Due to the national restrictions that are in place, and understandably, this part of the specification has been removed for the 2021 exams only. So with that in mind, students are now going to have a shorter paper 3 exam that just consists of focusing on answering exam questions on the issue booklet, the small information booklet, and unfamiliar fieldwork. They will no longer be required for this particular year to go out and collect their own fieldwork and write that up in their exam. Just so you can see how students will be assessed in their geography exam, you can see with paper 1, so this is the physical environment, you've got your topics here, which we've already talked through on the previous slide. The exam is an hour and a half in total, and it's worth 88 marks. So really, we try and explain to students that you need to be working at around a mark a minute, but obviously you can gain some time, particularly when you're completing the small multiple choice questions, which you can then use on the longer questions. But 88 marks in total, an hour and 30 to complete that in, and there'll be 3 marks awarded on one of the longer answer questions for spelling, punctuation and grammar. This particular paper equates to 35% of the final GCSE grade, and you can see here there's a breakdown. We have got multiple choice questions, short answer questions, so they could be 1 markers, 2 markers, right up to going on to your longer levels of response and extended prose, which are your 6s and your 9s. Paper 2, so this is the second exam that students will sit. You can see these are the human topics that we mentioned on the previous slide. Again, it's an hour and a half exam, 88 marks. So we again try to work at a mark a minute. 35% of the GCSE goes on this too. And you can see that there's a similar distribution of question types as well, right from multiple choice for each section, going up to your 6s or your 9s. And then assessment of paper 3, this has changed as I mentioned previously, just for the 2021 exams. So the total number of marks available for paper 3 this year will reduce from 76 to 56. So they've removed 20 marks in total to make up for the loss of that familiar fieldwork that students will not complete this year. There'll still be 6 marks of SPAG, so spelling, punctuation and grammar, available for the paper, and they'll be distributed amongst some of the longer answer questions. The total time for paper 3 is going to reduce from an hour and 15 to 1 hour in total. And question types, again, very, very similar to what you've seen for paper 1 and 2, multiple choice through to your 9-mark questions, which are the largest response questions in geography. So, just a few hints and tips as to how to approach exam questions in geography, because I think this is one of the things that students tend to find the hardest thing to grapple with. So, always look at how many marks a question is worth before starting your answer. If it's a 1-marker, you need a prompt and condensed response. Sometimes a word is absolutely sufficient. Obviously, it depends on the command word, but your answer should be very, very concise. Same with your 1 to 2 markers, so they tend to be very concise. You may have to develop a point, but again, it depends on the command word, but they should be no longer than 1 to 2 sentences. You then move up to your 4, 6 and 9 markers, which are level marked. So as with 1 and 2s, they're point marked. So if you make a point, you will get a mark for that, as long as it's accurate and correct. 4, 6s and 9s, they want you to do something with your information. So if you make a point, you have to develop it in line with the command word which has been given to ensure you access the higher levels available. 9 markers are obviously the longest question that we have in geography. They always require a short introduction. 1 to 2 lines is sufficient. We want a short, substantiated conclusion, which means a justified conclusion in relation to the question. And they always tend to want a balanced argument, which is finally justified at the end. So they tend to use command words such as discuss or evaluate. So you're able to give 2 sides to something before formulating your own judgment and portraying that across to the examiner. Always include case study facts and figures in 6 and 9 mark questions. That's absolutely essential if you want to be hitting the highest levels. And what I mean by a case study is a real world example. And we've studied lots of those across the course, and I'll talk more about those in a few slides' time. But they are absolutely essential if we want to be hitting level 2, level 3 answers. If a question says using an example you have studied / using your own knowledge, again, that's encouraging you to use your case study understanding and bring that into the question. Always refer to a figure in your answer if it is provided. They always, always, always use graphs, maps, diagrams, photographs in geography questions. And it's very easy to look at them and start writing and then forget what's there. It's really important that we constantly refer back to the figure and we extract information from it and put it into our answer. Because if the examiners are saying, please use this, use the figure, we need to show them that we're doing that. So one thing that we always encourage is if it says use the figure provided, we always say begin your answer with figure 1 shows that. And then you start to automatically manipulate and take data away from that and use it in your response. And another key tip is when describing a graph, always remember team. So when you look at a graph, you always start off your answer with looking at the trend. So is something increasing? Is it decreasing? Is it fluctuating? Evidence means apply some knowledge, so apply some data from the graph to support what you're saying. Is there any anomalies in there? Anything that doesn't quite fit the trend that you've identified? And support that with data or evidence again. And manipulate. Manipulate is the higher level skill. That's where you will not only extract data from a graph, but you will start to calculate differences within the data. So they're key tips for when you're answering your geography questions, and they will lead to success. Just a little bit more in terms of approaching exam questions, because the command words are absolutely key. They tell a student how to answer a question. We need to make sure that we fully understand those if we want to succeed, particularly with the longer answer questions. So one thing we do encourage is to bug the question, particularly for your extended prose. So bug stands for box, underline, and glance. So you will box the command word and you'll start to unpick what that means. You'll underline any key words in the title or in the question so that you can constantly refer back to them and start to generate ideas that are relevant to meet the needs of the question. And glance over the question to make sure you include everything needed. So keep going back to the question as you're writing it. Keep referring back to it in the 9 markers because that's your longer answer question to ensure that actually we're not going off on a tangent, we're sticking to exactly what we've been asked to do. And I have just included some information on these command words because there's lots of them used in geography and sometimes we can get them slightly muddled and that obviously will influence the quality of our answer in relation to the mark scheme. So I have put a link down to AQA here as well where you can see I've got this information from, but I think it's really worth getting to grips with what does assess mean. Assess is a command word that we tend to see with 9 markers, so you'd always give 2 sides to an argument before formulating a judgment. Okay, so please get to grips with those. Just a few other things. Case studies, because we've identified this is something that students tend to find quite challenging because there's lots to remember in geography, there's lots of content, and then you're adding in real world examples with facts and figures to remember too. So the Geography Department have created a Paper 1 and a Paper 2 case study booklet, which is relevant to everything we have studied. It has condensed copies, so you can see there's a couple of examples here, condensed copies of all the case studies that you need to know for your Paper 1 and for Paper 2. This is, you can use this alongside revision guides, but one thing we notice with revision guides is everyone studies completely different examples, but these are specific for Sherborne, these are specific for what every single class has studied, so if we can learn those and we know those, we're confident that we'll be able to apply those to the questions in our exam. Just a few other little final hints and tips from me is just how to revise in geography because this is something we hear a lot. I think because it is quite content heavy, it's how do we revise? Where do we start? One of the first things I would recommend is completing the topic checklist that we have in our books. Every student has an outline of all the content covered for each topic. And I really think it's worth just going through those, reading each of the statements and thinking, am I confident with that? Or is that something I need to revisit? And that'll help to then identify specific areas where we need to start revising. So that would be my starting point rather than just sitting with all topics in front and not knowing where to start. That can be quite overwhelming. So identify key areas that we find more challenging. Review the knowledge organisers. So we've got some knowledge organisers in geography, which I'll show you in a second, but they're condensed versions of every single topic again to make the key points manageable. Try retrieval quizzes, completing past paper questions. Completing past paper questions usually puts people off. People don't want to do it. I'd really highly recommend it. Teachers are more than happy to mark them. It gets you used to the command words. You can practice bugging the question, and then you're getting direct feedback on what it is we still need to do to make sure we access those higher levels. Things like mind maps, flashcards, dual coding, so using text and images to learn a concept. That's particularly useful for our landform formations because it's very easy to get those muddled up. So I'd really recommend an approach like that for learning coastal landforms, river landforms, and so on. Cornell note taking and Seneca quizzes as well. So just that quick retrieval, low stakes quizzing, but again, that'll help to identify areas that we maybe need to revisit. Couple of other things, these are the knowledge organisers that I have mentioned. So these have all been put onto Google Classroom for students by their teachers, or they've been given access to them in some way. Again, it's exactly the same with the case study booklets too, so that they can be using those and accessing those in their own time. And just finally from me, just a few useful websites that students may want to use. BBC Bitesize is really, really good and really useful, broken down into individual topics students can use. And there's lots more other sort of websites there that I'd really recommend them accessing, just to help recap some of those key concepts that we've covered. I hope that's been useful, and if anyone has any additional questions on the exams, on how we can support students to prepare for those exams, please don't hesitate to contact me at all. Okay, thank you very much.